I look a lot at how fast people run, and we have all this great technology, and I've got a lot of value out of looking at data from companies like Catapult and getting a general picture of what's going on the field. And this is the next gen stat. I just pulled this off the internet. You can pretty much pull anything off the internet now. You know, I won't say anything about Facebook, but you can get a lot of data off of the internet without having to talk to anybody. But if you look at 2017 season, you have like, I have top 10 guys, and I took an average of the top 10 guys, 21.6 miles per hour. You know, on average, the fastest was week 9, but it's all over the map. That's really lame average. Average of 62 yards per play. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, 21.6. Okay, put that in my bank here, in my memory bank. And then I looked at 2016, and I see on average the top 10 guys are faster by 1 mile per hour, which makes me think there's something wrong with next-gen stats. I cannot, you know, unless we're saying that they're getting slower. And an inside joke is I've been saying that it's probably NFL players, when they enter the league, they get slower every year because they're just not doing the running volume that they need to stay fast. When I presented at PFATS, and again, Coach Path could probably give more stats than me, I said to them, look, when I was training sprinters, you know, I don't know, 450 meters per session, 3 times per week, you know, over 40 weeks, that's about 50,000 kilometers, or 50,000 miles, or 50,000 meters, sorry, 50 kilometers, just over 30 miles of sprinting. Now, is anybody doing that in the NFL? And we're trying to get people to run 1/10 of a second faster over 100 meters, or maybe 2/10 if we're lucky, right? So that's how much work is being put in through the year just to make somebody faster. I don't think that's happening in the NFL, you know, even maybe 10% of that. So are people getting faster? I don't know, according to this, apparently not, but I still think there's something going on with the technology here. I don't think it's been really figured out yet. So that 1 mile per hour difference kind of makes me go, I don't know if I'm going to trust that. And so we see on the field, so just a return, and you'll see what happens here. They have a little ticker on the top there that says how fast he's going. He's not that fast. And then he gets up to a whopping 21.4 miles per hour on the way to a touchdown. Fabulous. Ran 127 yards. And so I look at that and I'm like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, where is that? Is that fast? Maybe he was the fastest guy that week. And then I look at what's happening on the track. And you know, somebody like Usain Bolt's running that before he gets to 20 meters. Right? Okay, he doesn't have pads on. He's not running on field turf or grass. Great, but you know, that's a very small percentage of what he actually is attaining. And throughout the race, you see where his numbers are. So he's running really fast. Again, he spends a lot of time on running. That's his deal. We understand that. Okay. And then I said, okay, let's look at the women. Wow, the women are running just as fast as Tyreek Hill by about 10 to 20 meters. So the women are running faster, 25 miles per hour. That's pretty impressive. Okay. You know, this is a practice, I think, in this one here. Practice and games. Anyways, it's about the same. But, you know, this 91 to 100% of max velocity, it's 1%. And then even if we look at 76 to 90%, and I presented this before at the Combine, we're like 4% of our running is fast, and then everything else, all the other movement, is pretty slow. Now, I understand there's acceleration involved in that, and that keeps the velocities down, so it would be nice to know what the rate of acceleration was per play. But we get a general idea of how fast people are running by just looking at the GPS data. And if we look at miles per hour, we're roughly running about 10 miles per hour most of the game, walking, running, jogging, shorter distances obviously for certain positions. But we're not getting up into these areas very often. And so I ask myself, is it happening in training? Should it be happening in training? I think it should be. So we probably could get away with running at least 6 steps, you know, up to about 10 meters, 10 yards, get the velocity up in training, maybe even a little farther. And I'm trying to spend a little more time, and I've talked a lot with Matt Jordan about ground contact times and different activities. And I had the pleasure of talking to Matt at the Combine, and he's working with a company who has I was working on in-shoe technology to measure ground contact times and forces, and I think that's really interesting. To me, it's almost going to be like race telemetry, where if you know what's happening on the ground, it can tell you a lot about a performance or potentially what happened in an injury. And I'm hoping the technology gets to that point where you're not just looking at movement, but you're looking at what's happening on the ground. And as you can see, we get down below 0.15 rather quickly. And if you're running fast, you're running below 1/10 of a second, and that's where it gets interesting. So I made a confusing graph, because obviously if you confuse people, they think you're smarter. World-class sprinter, less than 1/10 of a second. Long jump takeoff is probably around here, high jump takeoff, hurdle jump landing, depth jump, and then maximum strength qualities. And I would say even direction change is somewhere around here. It's not over here. So when I speak with Rob Panarello about ACL injuries and other lower body injuries, we talk a lot about what's happening when the foot hits the ground. How quick are things turning on? You know, and if we don't train that, are people exposed? Okay, so if we have been spending a lot of time over here, and this is probably where practice, you know, regular football stuff is in this area here, but when somebody has to turn on here and we don't work on that, is that a problem? I think it is. And again, I'm not an expert. I don't have the knowledge of Rob Panarello on the ACL injury side, but it makes sense to me that if we're missing parts of the spectrum, I think we're going to run into trouble at some point. And we don't all have to live here, but certainly we should be living, you know, in this area here. And even I talked to Jerry about the lifting side, and the lifting side, obviously things can feed left and right, back and forth, and the lifting side can feed this way. You know, I'm not necessarily a proponent of saying people have to lift heavy to run fast, but certainly it can help in other areas.